As we watch now, we have the wide shot here of the Capitol, which gives you a perspective of just how big this protest is.
I mean, we continue to get messages from people inside the building and reports that a lot of the members of the Senate and House are sort of on their own at this point and hunkered down. Several of them sent staff out as soon as they had an indication that there was a problem inside. So this is just a really extraordinary situation. I mean, that word just doesn't seem to fit what we're watching at this point. There are, there's a lot coming across on Twitter, and I know we have to be careful about it because, but so far the things that we've heard have turned out to be verified later on. But there's clearly pressure on the actual chamber. And that is something that they're trying to protect the sanctity of at this point in a very forceful way, which is, of course, understandable given the fact that people are now in this building. And also, I keep going back in my mind to Griff Jenkins speaking with that man on the street. I think a lot of this was that they were promised something. These people were told that today was going to overturn the election. And when you hear the passion in their voices, you can understand why they are severely disappointed. Now, we're going to talk a lot about whether or not those ideas should have ever been elevated for them. But the pressure on the vice president in the past few days has been extraordinary. And now he was the first person who was ushered out of that chamber to safety because he is under an enormous amount of pressure for the decision that he made and the expectation that so many of these people had for what he was going to do. So I just put yourself in his shoes in this moment. Very frightening time, to be sure, for him.
And Bret Baier, back in 1995, when I first came to Capitol Hill as a junior staffer, one of my jobs was to give tours of the U.S. Capitol building. And I loved that job. That building means so much to our country. It is so beautiful, and it is such a symbol of all that we stand for. And I do hope that anybody inside takes care to not destroy anything.
At that door inside the House. This is the door by which the president walks down for the State of the Union address. We see it many times when the House clerk comes out and announces the president through those two double doors. The windows have been broken, and now surrounding those doors are officers with their guns drawn to protect the House chamber. This does not happen in America, but it's happening today, and it's happening, and it is a sad scene, frankly, and it's not overstating it to say this is a major failure overall for the country.
Chris Wallace, I'm trying to think ahead a little bit as to how does this end?
Well, I think that at some point they're going to regain control of Capitol Hill and regain control. It sounds amazing that we're even saying these words. Regain control of the House and Senate chamber, and they'll go back to the certification of the electors. I think an interesting question, as we had pointed out, the objectors, led by about 140 in the House and about a dozen, maybe 13, 14 in the Senate, led by Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, had talked about objecting to as many as 5 or 6 states, the so-called swing states, starting with Arizona, which we were on right now, and a process, given the fact that there's 2 hours of debate allowed, and then particularly in the House with all the crowds and COVID, it takes an hour or so to vote, that each one of these objections could take 3 or 4 hours. You have 6 states, 3 or 4 hours. Even I can do that math. We're talking about the possibility of 24 hours. I wonder whether this may shut down some of the objections, and having done 1 or 2, whether they may feel they've made their point and go on. But obviously they can't begin again until they regain control of the Capitol building. And once they do, I assume they will go forward with Article 2 of the Constitution, which calls for the counting of the electoral vote and the certification of Joseph R. Biden Jr. as the 46th President of the United States.
Okay, Chris, I do want to bring back Griff Jenkins. Griff, you made the point after you interviewed the gentleman from Tampa that they were promised something, and they had just found out that Mike Pence decided not to do what the president asked him to do. Right before President Trump tweeted about supporting the Capitol Police, he said this on Twitter: Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. Griff Jenkins with an update.
Figured out in a minute. He has the power, the Department of Defense has the power to do the same thing after this request has now been officially made from the DC mayor and the Capitol Police. But that decision has not been made as of yet from the Defense Department. So what we're watching here is a moment in history. And Bill, you're getting that news from the House Majority Leader about shots fired. There are a lot of people I'm getting texts from inside the Capitol that are concerned about safety and a number of different things happening.
Well, Brett, thank you. I'll get some more information and come on back. I just want to get to our reporters. And I'm sitting here in Atlanta, by the way, Brett, and I'm staring at a board that we used throughout the night last night. No, we don't need to show it, guys. Been in 2 months ago. And you've got a U.S. Senate race that is too close to call because it's separated by 0.4 of a percentage point. And if it stays there, you're going to get a recount here to decide who controls the U.S. Senate. And then we moved to the morning hours today, and the president came out about 11:45, spoke for about an hour and a half, and he was fired up. And his supporters there had flown in last night from all over the country to gather there as he had beckoned them to come to Washington, D.C. After that, we went to the floor of the Senate, floor of the House, and we listened to Mitch McConnell make a case. We listened to Ted Cruz make his case about Arizona, and things were just starting to roll into what we expected to be an hours-long proceeding in Congress that would eventually move toward a point where they would certify the Electoral College. January 6, 2021. Screen right is a moment we watched about an hour ago. Chad Pergram with us now. Not sure where you are, Chad. We haven't spoken to you in 30 minutes. What do you have now?
Brett, I want to be very clear about something. This is the most significant breach of an American government institution since the Battle of Bladensburg, August 24th, 1814, when the British came and burned the Capitol and also burned the White House. We have never had an instance of an incursion inside the U.S. Capitol building to this degree since that time. Let's be clear, the mob upended American democracy today as they try to count the Electoral College. You have people taking over the House chamber, the Senate chamber, gunshots on Capitol Hill, an utter breakdown of the constitutional process. Bedlam. Now, the question is, what do they do to get this back on pace? The House and Senate, they have recessed subject to the call of the chair. They were individually debating the Arizona slate of electoral votes. Now, at some point, they have to come back and complete that process and can vote. Under the Electoral Count Act of 1887, you can recess for a certain period of time, but once you start that joint session, which is what started with Vice President Pence presiding today at 1 o'clock, you have to conclude this process within 5 days. You basically have until the 11th of January. So it's possible that they could, if they believe that the U.S. Capitol is unsafe, to continue with this process. Nowhere does it say in the Constitution or in the House or Senate rules that you have to meet here or do this process here. I remember when we had the earthquake in Washington, D.C. in 2011, the Senate was scheduled to have a brief session, and they met down the street at the post office. You know, but the scenes today of American democracy, of officials from the Sergeant at Arms office with guns drawn inside the House chamber. I mean, we haven't had an incident with firearms in the House chamber since you had Puerto Rican nationalists shoot several members of Congress in 1954. I mean, this is remarkable that this is unfolded today. And the question is, how do they get things back on pace?
Yeah.
Something is going to happen, and it's just an extraordinary image that we're seeing from these hallways of Congress. I mean, you know, you can get a pass, you can visit the Capitol building anytime you want. There's a process for doing that, but this is absolutely extraordinary. And you see members with their masks on for COVID and then reaching for gas masks as well to protect themselves in the chamber. And as I said, a lot of the younger staff members left early on. Some of them are all still there. Very devastating for them to see the United States Capitol in this situation as well. So this has to stop. Control has to be maintained. I just want to say one more thing about the DOD, because there was this story and look at these images as they come in. There was a story that said that the DOD rather, the Department of Defense, had refused to give any National Guard support. That has been, that story is not true, not verified, according to our own Jennifer Griffin. And there's been a lot of discussion at the Department of Defense, you know, because people kept saying, oh, well, will you get involved if there's not a peaceful transition of power? So their hesitancy here is to stand that line, to let the Capitol Police deal with this situation. But if it becomes much worse, there's going to be a very difficult decision to make here for the Department of Defense, Bill.
Yeah, well, Martha, thank you. We'll get to our reporters in a moment here. Juan Williams watching this as well. And Juan, it seems to have settled into a moment here where there were hundreds, perhaps thousands gathered on the Capitol steps. And I don't know what happened inside, but the reports are not good. Your observations as we watch this together now. Right now, Brett confirms that the request for the from the D.C. mayor has been considered by the Department of Defense for National Guard, but they don't want troops, Brett's telling us this, in uniform on the Capitol. They want to back up the police to give them the ability to shore up forces and clear out the building. It has not, however, been officially decided, so stand by for more news on that. Do we have Rich? We have Rich Edson. Let's go to him on the Capitol and find out what he is seeing now. Rich, you got me?
Here, this is the exterior of the Capitol. People started about an hour and a half or so ago streaming up the side, finally breaking through and getting to those areas there on the west front of the Capitol where they are not supposed to be. This is a good mile and a half from where a large part of where they were listening to President Trump speak a while ago. They began moving east towards the Capitol. It started as something where it was a protest, but then there were plenty of people in the crowd who were set on breaching this place. And it wasn't just the Capitol, it was the office buildings. Off to the right, that's the House side. Cannon House office building is beyond that, where you had several lockdowns. You had people streaming up the other side of the Capitol on the Senate side. And this is something the Capitol Hill Police, they were trying to control early on, but then shortly thereafter, you had plenty of other police officers from Washington, D.C. Metro Police come up to this area, begin to assist, running up in riot gear, coming in buses. People are angry, people are upset, people have been just congregating here and now moving throughout the entire area. It has been just a mess of protesters and police officers, and a place that really has been a level of chaos for quite some time. In fact, when you finally had protesters reach that top part there, you heard just roar come up from the crowd to kind of egg them on to continue going. That's when you started to hear flashbangs from Capitol Hill Police. That's when you had tear gas. And then shortly thereafter, we had people coming back towards us who had clearly been affected by the tear gas. So a lot of movement ongoing here. There's people leaving. There's still people coming here. But the bulk of this and what you're seeing here on Capitol Hill, that's been ongoing for some time. As you've gotten the reports from Chad and what's going on the inside. People have breached and gotten on in there. And there are people everywhere around here. The mayor of D.C. wants people off the streets by 6 p.m., which is a short while from now. Awful lot of people to be getting off the street in just that matter of time, Bill.
Rich, just give me a short answer. Do you see any security personnel where you are?
I'm sorry, Bill?
Do you see any security personnel, any Capitol Police, anyone?
So they're by us? No. What we have by us is basically protesters and a few other folks milling around here, but the police activity is, Stanford, why don't you show up here? We'll get up this way. This is Constitution Avenue right here. This is the north side of the Capitol. This is where the Senate side of the Capitol is and the Senate buildings are. A lot of police activity up there. That was just Capitol Hill Police. Well, then they were joined by Metropolitan Police Department. That's Washington, D.C. Police. They've been streaming up in that area to try to assist on all of this. All of that police manpower has been to congregate towards those office buildings. So if you can kind of see through the trees there on the left, that's the Russell Senate office building, one of the primary office buildings on the Senate side. And then across the street, you've got the Capitol complex. It's basically a mirror image on the south side of the Capitol, the other side of the Capitol. And you've got police officers who are congregating to the building because that's where the breach is, that's where the issue is. We're standing out right here. I mean, we've got plenty of police vehicles, and we've seen ambulances and plenty of other emergency vehicles out here, but there is very little, if real, no police presence, security presence where we are, because the action and where they're trying to get people out of and we're trying to prevent other people from going in is all within the Capitol building. And, you know, frankly, whenever you come around this area, if we were here, let's say, 1 week ago, there are plenty of Capitol Hill police officers who are watching the perimeter of the Capitol complex. It's a massive complex. You do see some, I guess there are some police officers sort of close to try to prevent people to get up from that side of Constitution, but the plaza here where you see all of these people, that's just packed and packed with protesters, and that's really all you've got over there, Bill.
The previous White House chief of staff said the president's tweet is not enough. He can stop this now and needs to do exactly that. Tell these folks to go home. The president has said stop the violence, but he hasn't said to go home. Alyssa Farah, who used to be the White House communications director, before she left to become a spokesperson for the Republican candidates down in Georgia, tweeted out, "Condemn this now, Donald Trump. You are the only one they will listen to for our country." And there's been a whole host of tweets from Republicans. Alan Kinzinger, sometimes a Trump critic, a Republican from Illinois. "This is a coup attempt." Tom Cotton, very conservative senator from Arkansas. "Violence and anarchy are unacceptable."